Hey everyone, welcome back to Normal, but Not. The podcast where we unravel the habits and beliefs that seem completely normal, but actually keep us stuck. I'm your host, Crystal Centinello, recovering people pleaser, trauma-informed boundaries and empowerment coach, and here to help you question the so-called normal that may be quietly running your life. Today, we're diving into something near and dear to my heart, learning to say no. Now, let me take you back to a time when I was the person who said yes to everything. You know that mom who bakes 5 dozen cookies for the bake sale even though she has 12 minutes to spare? And I mean literally 12 minutes. That was me. And not only did I refuse to buy the store-bought cookies, I also showed up for every random birthday party, helped my kids with school projects, usually the night before they were due, and sat through 3-hour-long action movies with 0 character development just because someone else who I loved wanted to watch them. But after burning out on people pleasing, I started learning to say no. Now, not to reveal my age here, but somebody once said, when you hit 40, you finally say, fuck it. And that's about the time it happened to me. So if you are far under that age, start listening now so that you don't have to start saying no later and start getting your life back when you're 40. If you can start getting it back sooner, do it. And if you're well after 40 and that passed and you haven't started saying fuck it yet, now's the time. Because here's where I'm at now. These days, I turn down the bake sales, or at the very least, if there is an obligation, an actual requirement, then I'll pick up the cookies from the store. And that third cousin's neighbor's birthday party and the last minute school projects, I actually say no. And let me tell you, I still have my weak spots. No one is perfect, and we're not looking for perfection here. We are looking for progress. I still say yes to all of my kids' emotional moments and their school events, especially being a divorced mom where I have my children 50% of the time. There is an added layer of guilt. And I feel like I'm always trying to make up for something. But I've found a balance. And with work, that has been one of my biggest struggles. The thought of saying no at work still freaks me out. I used to have an abusive boss, which definitely didn't help the situation. But on top of it, the thought would go through my mind. What if I say no and I'm no longer a team player? What if I lose my job? How will I provide for my family? How will I get food on the table? What are we going to do? End up in a box under the bridge somewhere with nothing to eat? You know, it was like the book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Once you start saying yes, I don't like this copy. Then there's work. Saying no at work, that still feels impossible some days. I value being a team player, being available to clients, students, coworkers. I mean, for those of you who don't know, I have been a teacher and working in the education system for years because that's how I have provided for my family. In my abusive marriage, I used to be the breadwinner as the teacher. Don't even get me started on that. And with all of that pressure, that thought of what if I say no? What if I lose my job and we have no food on the table? It's easy to catastrophize like that. But realistically, me saying no to one task wasn't going to collapse my career. It's kind of like that book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. If you say yes once, the requests keep coming. But when you start saying no, the world doesn't fall apart either. In fact, someone else will probably just take care of it. And if you've ever heard the phrase that I learned from a coworker, doing work well and saying yes to things doesn't get you that promotion or the raise. It just gets you more work. So remember, when you start saying no, nothing bad happens. Someone else just handles it. And maybe it didn't even need to be done in the first place. Is saying yes to everything normal? I mean, for those of you listening, it probably feels like it. Especially if you've grown up being praised for being helpful, agreeable, and accommodating. But we have to ask, at what cost? Research shows that always saying yes doesn't just lead to burnout. It actually damages your mental health, drains your energy, and leaves you with little time for yourself. But who needs research to know that? You've been living it. A lot of us picked up this habit in childhood. For me, it was when saying no wasn't even an option. If I was asked to fetch something for an adult, that was it. I couldn't say no without facing disappointment or conflict. I mean, to make matters worse, the thing that I was supposed to fetch as a child was getting another beer for a family member from the refrigerator that was out back at our cottage growing up. And if I wanted to say, so-and-so, alcohol's not good for you, the backlash that I would have gotten was unbelievable. Not physical. I wouldn't have gotten spanked or anything, but it was that emotional turmoil that I would experience. Fast forward to adulthood, and I carried this pattern with me to my relationship, my work environments. Saying yes would avoid that confrontation, to avoid feeling like I was letting someone down or just feel guilty after saying no. And maybe playing those things out would not have resulted in the same experiences I had as a child. But history tells a story. History makes us question what's going to happen in the future. So we just stick with what's safe. Sound familiar? I mean, if you are a people pleaser like I was, this is your normal, but it doesn't have to be. Last week, we talked about the importance of starting small and recognizing those patterns where you are tempted to say yes. This week, let's build on those and take your boundary setting skills to the next level. So, step one, this is that point. If you've been listening, you've been doing something else, get your pencil and paper out, your notes app, whatever it is, and start taking notes. We're leveling up your nose. By now, you should have practiced saying no in some low stakes situations. Maybe you've turned down a social event or you politely declined a request at work. This week, I want you to challenge yourself to say no in a situation where the stakes feel just a little higher. Maybe it's with a family member who always relies on you for emotional support, or at work where you're usually taking on tasks that aren't even yours without being asked. Trust yourself that you can handle the discomfort, knowing that your no is setting a healthier boundary for you. Find the comfort in the discomfort. Number 2, reinforce your priorities. Last week, we discussed reframing no as an action of self-respect. This week, let's take that further by reinforcing your yeses. What are the things that truly align with your values, your priorities, your well-being? You can say yes to the things that fill you up and energize you. But to protect that energy, you have to say no to the things that drain you. Make a list if you are not sure of what those things are. After so many years of saying yes to everyone else, you might not even know what drains you anymore. Number 3, deal with the guilt. Just deal with it. Let's address that guilt head on. Saying no is hard because we feel like we're letting people down. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for other people's feelings. Guilt is a learned response, especially for people pleasers. This week, when you say no and you feel that guilt creep in, take a deep breath. Acknowledge the guilt is there and just let it pass. Remind yourself, you're not rejecting the person. You're prioritizing your own limits. You have to sit with it and let it go. Number 4, model healthy behaviors for your kids. Or if you don't have children, others around you. Last week, I talked about how saying no is a gift you give yourself and how it sets an example for your kids. This week, we're going to dive deeper into that. Every time you set a boundary and say no, you're teaching the next generation that it's okay to stand up for themselves. Your no today could help your children or those around you grow up with healthier boundaries than we had. And I'm going to throw in a quick story because, as I mentioned, being a divorced parent with 50-50 custody, I struggled over taking self-care while my children were with me because on the non-custody days, I figured that's my time for me. And what I realized what was happening is I was never showing my children what it looked like to have self-care because I wasn't doing it when they were around me. So as guilty as I felt the first time I decided to take a bath when my daughter wanted to watch a TV show with me after a long, hard day I had at work, I said, I need a few minutes. I need to take a bath. And I used aromatherapy and I used Epsom salts and I lit candles and I played music. And not only did I take time for me, but the best thing came from that. About a week later, she asked me to do the same thing for her. She wanted the same bath drawn so that she could have that self-care experience. So setting an example worked. And the last thing, this was a new one. It's called the 24-hour rule. This week, I want you to try practicing the 24-hour rule before saying yes to anything that requires your time or emotional energy. Instead of answering immediately, and I know that is a challenge, give yourself a day to think it over. If you have the person on the other end expecting an immediate response, then you can say, let me think on that. Let me get back to you. Let me see what I can do. But you don't need to respond with yes or no yet. Think on it. It will allow you to really assess whether saying yes is in line with your priorities or if it's just a knee-jerk reaction to people pleasing. Use the time to ask yourself, will this add to my well-being or will it take from it? The simple pause can help you make more thoughtful, intentional decisions without feeling pressured in the moment. Remember, saying no isn't selfish, it's survival. And once you make it part of your life, you'll start to see the ripple effect. Suddenly you have more time, more energy, more room to say yes to the things that really matter. So, is saying yes all the time normal? Maybe for people pleasers. It feels like the only option, but that doesn't mean it's healthy. When you start to harness the power of saying no, you're reclaiming your boundaries and your sense of self. It's not about shutting people out. It's about letting yourself in. And speaking of letting yourself in, make sure you tune in next week when we explore another big topic. Is burnout normal? I'll be talking about how burnout sneaks up on us, why it feels so common, and how to break the cycle before it takes over. You won't want to miss it. And if you haven't already, check out my Breaking Free from Guilt cheat sheet at crystalsentinello.com/resources. That's Crystal with a K, sentinello.com/resources. It's loaded with tips to help you set boundaries and stop the guilt that fuels burnout. There will be more resources added to that later on, and you will have unlimited access for free for a limited time right now.